We are revealing Jackson Warfield's top 50 games of all time. 10 have already been revealed in that video. 10 more are getting revealed in this one. I'm Jackson Warfield. Now, I explained all the rules and regulations I imposed upon myself in the first of these videos, where we went through number 50 down to 41. If you want to see what those rules are, go ahead and check it out. I'll mention the important one. This is a greatest games of all time list. A lot of top 100 all-time lists are really just top 100 games at the moment.
I don't fit the mold.
You know, videos like that when someone says, I haven't played this game much lately, and they drop the game down on their list. I don't do that. Let's get started with number 40. Number 40 for the greatest board games of all time is Castles of Burgundy. Castles of Burgundy is a Euro-style game. It doesn't really work like a worker placement game, or like a lot of them. In Castles of Burgundy, you're trying to build out your castle and the surrounding. There's a cat outside my window. What on earth? Hold on. This cat before, that's not my cat. Oh, there he goes. Castles of Burgundy, where you're building out a castle that is as nice as possible for the stray cats. So the Castles of Burgundy is an interesting game. It plays out where you have a lot of dice rolling, and that controls what types of additions you can make to your castle homestead. It's a moderately complex game. It's different than any real worker placement game that I've played. I think it's kind of unique. I haven't played necessarily all of the Stefan Feld games, but this one is obviously the most famous of his and the one most people will be familiar with. It's funny. Part of the reason why I really like this game is it was kind of the gateway game to beyond gateway games for my wife. You see, the game is like a complexity rating on Board Game Geek of around 3. If you have only played games like Catan and Pandemic, it might seem like a lot. First time I played this game with my wife, she didn't like it. It was too much. Then after playing a few other games and going back to it, she was like, this is great. I was able to watch her go from someone who was barely aware of some of these games that I was, continuing to compile on shelves. That was like 7 or 8 years ago. Now she'll play anything that I put out. She'll play a lot of the games I put out there because I will say like, hey, you didn't like Castles of Burgundy at one time, and look what happened. So Castles of Burgundy is an important game for me. It's an important game for the Warfield household. So Castles of Burgundy is number 40. Number 39, The Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation. This won't be the last Lord of the Rings board game on the list. The Lord of the Rings is easily my favorite fantasy setting or fantasy property, fantasy universe. Probably my favorite universe of all categories, not just fantasy. And it's a great one for gaming in different ways. What Lord of the Rings Confrontation is it's a Stratego-style 2-player game. You have one player as the Fellowship trying to dip the ring in Mount Doom, and you have one person is effectively Sauron and is trying to get the ring bearer before they drop the ring in. Believe it or not, it's possible to make a Stratego-style game that actually seems to fit the Lord of the Rings story. You see, a lot of Lord of the Rings board games, what they'll do is it'll be asymmetrical, so it'll be good versus evil, and the win conditions will be slightly different for each. And if the game is designed well, you at least get that asymmetrical dynamic. You don't necessarily feel with a Stratego-style game that you're in the movie. You get that dynamic, and you know you're playing a Lord of the Rings game because of it. The Lord of the Rings Confrontation is one of my favorite implementations of this classic Lord of the Rings style format. Strange thing, I've actually somehow never played Stratego. I had 2 siblings too. My younger sister, they weren't really gamers. Growing up, I played a lot of games of Risk against myself. Number 38, Stone Age. Stone Age is a worker placement game. In a lot of ways, it is the entry point into worker place games. Stone Age is a relatively simple game. Each player is controlling a tribe of Stone Age cavemen, and you send them to do different things each turn. You might send them to go get food, you might send them to go get gold. Depending on how many cavemen you send, you get a better chance of rolling dice and coming up with gold. For example, you send a caveman to go get gold, you're not guaranteed to get gold. Each caveman is effectively one die that you have to roll. Your total number adds up to, I think gold off the top of my head, you need, I think to total up to 6 to get a piece of gold. So you need to send multiple cavemen to make sure you get it. And you have to feed your tribe every turn. That's how Stone Age plays. It's a great light worker placement game, and it's especially good if you want to introduce someone to the concept of worker placement game. If you don't know what that is and you're watching a video like this, worker placement games are basically action selection games, but you use little workers to reserve action, so it's much more immersive than just saying like you have a bunch of things you can do in a turn and only one person can do it. So Stone Age is great for that. I've also played the kids version, which is a separate game, which doesn't, I really would have wished that they had a kids version of a game that was kind of a worker placement style game, because my first Stone Age doesn't really have any worker placement in it, which is kind of unfortunate. So number 38 is Stone Age. Number 37, Cyclades. I will pronounce it as Cyclades because that rhymes with Hades. I don't know if it's the correct way to pronounce it. It could be, I guess, Cyclades or Cyclades or Kyclades. Kyclades? Cyclades. Cyclades is a Matago game from the mid-2010s, or early 2010s, really. Actually, this might be 2008. Cyclades is the first of a series of games which I actually have kind of lined up together over here. Is that on screen? But let me turn this, because I can do that. So, you see, I got it right next to Kemet and Inish. Inish, I'm more confident on how it's pronounced. Cyclades is a game where it's an area control, dudes on a map style game. All the players are controlling their own little armies. But the way the game works is there are two phases to each round. First phase is where you bid for the favor of gods. So, for example, Ares or Zeus. And the second phase of each round is where you actually do things. And what you can do is based on which god you won the favor of. So if you win the favor of Ares, you get to move your troops across land. If you get to win the favor of Poseidon, you get to do stuff with your ships. And so it's nice bidding and tactical area control style game. Great combination of the two, and actually works surprisingly well with two players, because all you have to do is you effectively get to bid for two actions per turn instead of just one. My favorite time playing this took a long time to play because of the group that we were playing with, and we had one guy who had a chance to win and he kept passing on it for some reason. I don't know why. But it's a great game for the people that are, say, used to risk and need something a little more interesting, that they still are going to have some understanding of how to play and how to win. I mentioned in the last video, number 45 for me is Imperial 2030, and part of the reason why I like that game so much is because it broke my brain and I had to relearn how to play the game after having played Risk and then jumping into Imperial 2030. Cyclades is a little bit of a smoother transition. Plus, the theming is excellent. You got the miniatures in there, the Greek miniatures. You have that one expansion. If you have the first editions of the games, you have the one expansion where you have monsters that you can use for Cyclades or Kemet, which is a nice little thing, although it's a little bit frustrating to decide which box to actually store them in. I think I store them in Cyclades because I like the game a little bit more. Spoiler, Kemet's not ahead of it. Overall, Cyclades is great. It's one of the games that I added to my collection very early on, too, in my obsession with board games. So Cyclades is number 37. Number 36, War of the Ring, 2nd edition. Of all the games on my top 50, one game I have only played once, and it's War of the Ring. And that is a bit of a strange thing, because the fact that I've only played it once can make it seem like the game is ranked too highly, because after all, I've only played it once. How can I rank it so high? And you could also say it's not ranked highly enough because I've only played it once. I haven't fully appreciated it yet. I think 36 is kind of fair for those considerations. You see, the one time I played War of the Ring, it was played over the course of 5 nights. I played with my wife. I think it was 5 nights, partially because she was pregnant with our second kid. It was that night, fatigue is what it is. My wife, who's also a Lord of the Rings buff, she was actually one that got me into it way back in the day. So War of the Ring is maybe the best technically designed board game that exists. The question is just how playable is it and how learnable is it? Because it's kind of a masterpiece. What it does is it's a card-driven and dice-driven game that somehow allows you to follow the events of the Lord of the Rings somewhat closely. I mentioned this in my Lord of the Rings: A Card Game retrospective. A lot of board games that are based on Lord of the Rings have to either go for immersion, which makes you feel like you're in the movie, or agency, which lets you do whatever you want, which means do what could be different than the movie. What War of the Ring does is it starts you where the movie starts. You will veer off the main storyline almost certainly during the course of the game. But then somehow, despite everything going on in the game is like a complexity factor of 4 on Board Game Geek, come down to the same ending where like there's a chance of each side winning. That's not to say that what you've done in the middle of the game doesn't matter, because it does. The shadow player, so that's the bad guys. Are they going to complete this siege and take over a stronghold, or is the Fellowship going to actually destroy the ring? It's not clear what's going to happen. You're drawing tokens from bags to see what you get on Mount Doom. It's a great game for that. I'm genuinely stupefied at times at how the game works so well. I have the expansions for it just because I love it. It's almost a collector's item for me. I have the Battle of 5 Armies too. I'm looking forward to playing it again and eventually playing the expansions, and I may even do a video but doing some basic painting with the War of the Ring, like for example at least just painting the rims, or maybe doing a step-by-step on how to start painting them without leaving you at a point where you wish you had stopped earlier, because now you have to either finish it or go back and undo all the paint job that you've done. Painting a board game, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. You've never done it before. That might be a future video, but that's a separate topic. War of the Ring, Number 36 game for me all time. Can easily see it going up higher in the list. Number 35. Ethnos. Ethnos, I've only played the first edition of. The newer edition of the game, I haven't heard amazing things because apparently they went into weird forms of iconography that are a little bit challenging. But Ethnos, easiest way to describe this. So you're drawing cards every turn and you're using sets of cards to claim territories. And you're trying to lay claims on territories. And you're playing like this over the course of several rounds. So while you're looking at what regions are being controlled on the map with these nice little discs that stack, that are very nice little components, you're also paying attention to the other players and trying to figure out where they're going to put their influence next. You have to decide whether or not you're going to wait for certain sets or whether you put smaller sets of cards together and go grab territories earlier. Ethnos it's a great game. When you play it, it screams that it needs some sort of a IP style licensing. Like the fact that this wasn't a game based on, a Song of Ice and Fire or anything like that seems like a missed opportunity because it's generic fantasy. Like super generic fantasy. There's got to be some IP out there that was ready to sell the rights for this game. But yeah, no, Ethnos, it's a good game. I recommend it. If you can find the first edition, I recommend that. Second edition, I don't know yet. But Ethnos is number 35. Number 34, Mysterium / Mysterium Park. Mysterium Park as the board game contraction.
Should've, would've, hadn't, ma'am, 'twas. Oh, they're getting closer together.
Or the anti-expansion, kind of the streamlined version of Mysterium, I think might be the better game, but they're effectively the same game, just done a little bit differently. Mysterium and Mysterium Park are both hidden information style games, where one person is trying to communicate with the rest of the table based on trippy cards. The cards that you're using for this are similar to Dixit. But the reason why I have Mysterium and Mysterium Park higher up on my list than Dixit is because Mysterium gives the players a chance more so to cooperate and talk about what the images that in this case it's the ghost, that the ghost is actually sharing with everybody, which those can be really funny discussions because it's amazing how different people can key in on different aspects of a card. So if you look at a Mysterium card, someone might key in on like a little dude in the corner. Someone might focus on the fact that there are ladders. I remember playing this once and someone was obsessed with anything that had a ladder. It was like the ladder, that's got to be the whole point of this card. And I was a ghost for that game and the ladders were completely off base. Mysterium Park streamlines Mysterium. The game kind of needed a little bit of streamlining, but in some ways it loses some of its luster. There are some games where the fact that they're not streamlined actually makes them more fun games because you just have a lot more things going on. And maybe the theme doesn't always match the mechanics perfectly, but you get to do a bunch of stuff. You get to play with your nice components. The game takes a little bit longer. It's a more communal experience. Mysterium Park is almost too streamlined. You can get the whole thing done in like 20 minutes or so, and you've kind of lost the chance to live in the ambiance of like, what's this ghost trying to tell us? A lot of games like Mysterium struggle for getting a theme to perfectly fit the mechanics. So for example, in Mysterium, it is a little bit strange that you have a ghost that is trying to communicate a different murderer to each player, and in Mysterium Park, a ghost is trying to communicate a different innocent person to each player and communicate like where the crimes did not occur. It's difficult to find a theme that perfectly replicates one person picking images to try and communicate things to other players on what to do. If anyone could come up with a way to theme that replicates how someone would actually act in a game, like I don't know why a ghost would be doing that. If you can figure out a way to do that, contact the designers of Mysterium and make them make a third version of it, because I'm not quite sure how to do it. To be fair, I haven't really thought about it that much either. I just know it can be done. So Mysterium and Mysterium Park, number 34. Number 33, Blood on the Clock Tower. Blood on the Clock Tower is a game that is a little bit tough to get your hands on. It is a social deduction game where everyone in the game... I just sneezed, so if I'm look like I'm about to cry, it's not because I like Blood on the Clock Tower quite that much. Blood on the Clock Tower, it's a social deduction game based on the Assassins game, where you have one person in the circle who's a murderer, and everyone's trying to figure out who that person is. Blood on the Clock Tower adds so many layers to it that you need someone to actually be running the game. So you basically have a game master. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, I'll just say that there's no other way to get it to work. And what it does with everyone having individual roles and the way the game plays out over, in this case, several rounds, it's the best social deduction experience you can have. The only reason why it's not higher in the list is because it takes a bit to get going. The game master needs to understand the scenario and be able to run the game in advance. And you need to have a good number of people to get it to work. It's not like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, realizing werewolf is actually the game that it's kind of based on. Assassins is actually a different game. Given that not everybody's going to go in knowing how to play, the person running the game needs to be ready to do it. But this is the kind of game where I'm excited the next time I say have a bunch of friends over to play a game, to do the thing where you walk into the house and the game has now begun. We're all going to sit in a circle. They're going to turn the lights off. Going to be candle lights, things like that. It's going to be cool. My favorite moment from the game, I was playing a scenario where I was effectively like an archer. And my ability was once during the game, I could just kill someone. That was it. If I killed the bad guy, great. I think it was the imp we were going for here. And at one point during the game, I was convinced that I knew who the imp was. And I was like, this is my shot. So I stand up, pull back my imaginary bow. So you have 15 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't loose this arrow. I was trying to be more on theme. I was playing it with like kind of strangers, so it didn't go off the best. It was fun for me. Yeah, Blood on the Clock Tower, number 33. Number 32, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is very similar to Mysterium in the way it works, but the goal is different. So Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, one player is the forensic scientist.
I don't get along with people.
Who is the person who knows which of the other players committed a crime. Basically, everyone are like policemen at a police precinct. And one of them is, the dirty cop. And the forensic scientist knows this and for some reason can't talk. I don't know. The theme, like I said, with Mysterium, the theme for these kind of games can be a little bit tough. The forensic scientist is trying to give signs to the rest of the cops on who the actual dirty cop is. And all the different cops are making claims based on what they're seeing. Everyone has like a pile of evidence in front of them, and they're going to see this person has a knife, this person has a katana, so who is it going to be? And so now you get into a social deduction aspect where people are trying to bluff and act like they're not the murderer when they are, or when they're not, which can make it hard to do. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is easier to get to the table than Mysterium. The theme fits a little bit better, even though it's still a little bit honky. In Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, when you think you know who it is, you basically have to put your badge on the line, which means you got one guess, and if you get that guess wrong, that's your last official guess in the game. You can still play and make discussions, but you can't make an official guess to try and win the game anymore. Play with a lot of players too. So if you need a game that can play easily 8 players, it's Deception, Murder, Hong Kong is the game for that. I keep hoping that another Deception game has come out because Deception, Murder in Hong Kong implies that there's going to be another Deception game. I'm not sure that one has. Let me check. Yeah, all I can tell is that you had the Undercover Allies expansion. Hopefully another one comes out. Maybe they can figure out the theming this time and how to get a theme to perfectly fit the whole imperfect communication mechanic. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is number 32. And number 31, Raiders of the North Sea. I haven't played all of the Garfield games, worker placement style games that are out there. There are a lot of those. You know them when you're looking at it. So we have Raiders of the North Sea. I've played Architects of the West Kingdom. We have like Viscounts of the West Kingdom, Scholars of the South Tigris. There's a lot of these. Raiders of Scythia is out there too. Raiders of the North Sea and Architects of the West Kingdom are the ones that I've played. I've played Raiders also with all the expansions. I like Raiders of the North Sea, partially because I'm a bit of a sucker for theming, and I like Viking theme. I don't necessarily think I am a Viking. I'm like 1/8 Norwegian or something like that. But I like how Raiders of the North Sea works. It's a place a worker, take a worker kind of a thing, which I think it was one of the first games to have a mechanism like that. Part of what I really like about the game is you're building out a boat, like a crew of Vikings, and the artwork for these Vikings is really good. I like the team building, and then you go in and you go to raid a settlement and you go get the stuff, and there's a little bit of dice rolling, a little bit of chance in there, but not too much. It's a fun game. I like it more than Architects of the West Kingdom, partially because of the theme. I mean, Architects is an interesting game because you also have the whole arresting of your other friends' meeples thing, which is a fun mechanic. I think I have to play that a little bit more, though. I don't feel as compelled to try and play it as I do Raiders of the North Sea. Raiders of the North Sea, the expansions are nice additions too. For example, in the Fields of Fame, you get a lot stronger Vikings that you can add to your crew. It's funny, Champions of Midgard and Raiders of the North Sea came out around the same time. I didn't like Champions of Midgard as much. I preferred the cards representing your crew instead of the dice, like in Champions of Midgard. Champions of Midgard isn't a bad game. I got stomped when I played Champions of Midgard, which might have hurt my opinion of the game a little bit. I usually don't mind losing, but I don't know. I have to give that game another try. But a lot of people think that Champions of Midgard is their favorite of the Viking-themed worker placement raiding games. Raiders of the North Sea is my choice there. By the way, Raiders of the North Sea also, I like the app quite a bit. It pulls it off. There are some board games that have an app version where it either seems like, you open it up and you're like, I can't I can't do this, it's too small, or like it takes too long to learn the game, or like the tutorial takes a while. Raiders of the North Sea, I found you can kind of get up and running fairly quickly. Raiders of the North Sea is number 31 all time. So we got 30 to go on Jackson Warfield's top 50 games of all time. So if you want to see the top 30 games of all time, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next installment. Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.